Hey folks, how's it going? I'm Josh. We are back. This is part 4 of this part 2 series, and this is the last video. We only have about roughly 14 minutes left. So cool. So we are on I didn't get to hear what he said this is called
For the
again.
Necrons.
Necrons. All right.
The Necrons are spooky, scary skeletons and very grimdark again. They have a much more fleshed out lore than before. Back in the day, they were just undead Egyptian space terminators, and they still look that way, but now they actually have a story. So way back in the day, you had the Necron tier. Kind of see a theme here: Eldari, Eldar, Krork, Orc, Necron, Necron tier. So the Necron tier were this race of generally kind of shitty people. Not because they were personally shitty, but because their lives were awful. They were ill-fated to a horrible existence of radiation and a terrible planet they lived on, and everything just really sucked. Being a Necron tier was just really depressing. They really were looking for immortality. They were extremely reliant on the hope that they would eventually find the key to living forever and just stave off this horrible nature that they were thrust upon them, and therefore they could become the most dominant race in the galaxy. And they found this group. They're called the Old Ones. Imagine them kind of like the Forerunners in Halo or the Xel'Naga in StarCraft, right? These Old Ones were these strong, pretty much omnipotent beings. And they, of course, knew the key to immortality. So the Necrons went to them and said, please, show us your ways. And the Old Ones said, piss off. Not really, they were a lot more humble about it, but they did not want to share their secret of immortality with the Necrons. The Necrons, of course, took this very well and waged war with them, kind of under this united banner. The Necron different dynasties didn't really like each other, but under this one man, the Silent King, he thought the best way to unite his race was to do this giant war with the Old Ones out of spite for them keeping the secret of immortality to them. This was known as the War in Heaven, and this is actually like a multi-stage war, because during this war in heaven, they discovered the Star Gods, a whole new race of people known as the Catan, or the Catan. These Star Gods were also very much like Old Ones, almost omnipotent beings, and they too had the key to immortality. And so the Necrons went to them and said, hey, can you help us fight off the Old Ones? Can you help us kill these Old Ones, you, the Catan? And the Catan said yes. And in fact, we can help provide you with the immortality you so desperately seek. So the Silent King of the Necrons decided to make a pact with the Catan to allow them to accept this generous gift of immortality upon them. But this, of course, had been a horrendous trap, and the Necrons were dragged in chains to this biotransference where their flesh was stripped from them, replaced with nothing but a metal hollow shell, as their souls were ripped from their body and fed to the Catan. And the Catan fattened up. They got chonk on the souls of the Necrons. As this was their plan all along, they consumed the flesh and souls of the Necron tier and turned them all into unwilling robotic slaves just to serve their will. And then, with their new-founded Necron army, they pointed their guns at the Old Ones, and the Catan continued their domination of the stars and their genocide, complete and full genocide of these Old Ones. The Old Ones did their best to stave it off. They even created other races, the Eldari and the Orcs, to try to fight off the horrifying Necron army and the Catan above them. But there was absolutely no possible chance for them. And the Old Ones were absolutely extinguished across the galaxy. Their entire race completely removed. Full-on 100% genocide. However, during all this, the Catan, so just infatuated with their victory, started fighting each other for fun, for sport, and for small differences, doesn't matter. The Catan, with these overpowered people, they're going to eventually hit each other at some point. And as they began just menially fighting each other, the Eldari and the Orcs actually started pushing on the Catan's borders a little bit, giving them a little bit of a run for their money. And as this continued, this is when the Silent King, who retained his consciousness, decided to leap into action and start a full-scale revolt against their Catan masters. And this revolt was bloody, as the entire Necron army was surged off to destroy these star gods. They were able to, just after suffering horrendous losses, were able to turn the tide of the war. And they took these Catan and they blasted them. Because as these star gods are unkillable, they were able to break them into thousands of shards and entrap them in giant stasis vaults to now actually be slaves to the Necrons.
Man.
And with the Necrons having the entirety of their old gods enslaved to them, they realized that soon their race was about to be attacked by the overcoming new races, the Eldari and the Krorks. And so what they did is they retreated into giant stasis tombs in order to preserve their energy and their strength for when one day they would be reawakened and they would be able to rule the galaxy that was rightfully theirs. And then some dingus Adeptus Mechanicus guy diddled with a green console, and now the Necrons are back, and they see all these primitive races on their lawns, and they think, get the fuck off of it. The Necrons are back, super advanced, and they are here to reclaim the galaxy that they so rightfully believe is theirs. Now, at tabletop, they're a lot like that. Tons of undead Egyptian skeleton robots that when they die, they just get right back up because they keep on reanimating. Hard to kill, tons of crazy stuff. You can use the Catan themselves as units to fight with. It's pretty cool. The Necrons are one of the three major events in 40k. The Horus Heresy, the Fall of the Eldar, and the Awakening of the Necrons are all pretty substantial events. And the Necrons themselves are pretty dang cool as well. Here's a good quote from a wonderful Dawn of War game. Lucky creatures, as long last you have found the tranquility of death. I was like you once, clinging to life and blind to the truth. When I uncovered the truth, I too shuddered and paled with fear. Deep in these catacombs I was remade. Here my brethren slumbered for eons while the living grew like weed. My Lord knew this day would come. He had plans for us all. We would purge this world once more. So come, poor victims of life. We will grant you tranquility in these crypts. Kronos will be a tomb world once more. Necrons are also pretty smug. Trazen the Infinite especially, a little dickhead. But speaking of dickheads, last race, let's talk the Tau.
We made a fucking Wookiee.
The exact formation of the Tau Empire is not entirely understood. However, a long time ago, many thousands of years ago, in the 40k world, that is, some Imperial navigation vessels were going around through different areas, and they saw a primitive race, blue people, smacking each other with sticks and stones. They thought, dumb Xenos race, who gives a shit, and they bailed. Then this giant warp storm occurred right in that major area, unable to be breached. Then, once that warp storm 6,000 years later subsided, hello, those little sticks. Well, they decided to actually have no war of any kind and all just unite together under one flag of the Tau Empire. And now they have gigantic starships and Gundam robots and lasers and railguns and mechs, and they are here to ruin your day for the greater good. That is generally the Tau Empire. They have this kind of feeling of this homogenous group. All species can go underneath the banner of the greater good. The greater good is their idea of the fundamental increase and help of all. In fact, they are most likely the most like the Covenant in Halo, where they have the overarching prophets, being the ethereals, who are actually kind of dicks and like to pull at strings a little bit, but then you have all these different races directly underneath them, and they all work together in this big group as this large, foreboding race that tries to spread their weirdly pseudo-religious influence across the galaxy. The alien is not intrinsically evil. Do not hate him. Pity him, his ignorance. Seek to understand his differences and equate him with his inadequacies. Only then will he accept his place in the greater good. That is generally the Tau. And if you're kind of wondering like what their mainly big shtick is, well, they're all about big robots and mechs. They have laser rifles and rail guns. They got giant mechs with tons of missile pods and heavy rail rifles and rail guns and burst cannons and ion accelerators and void shields and all this stuff. And that is generally what the Tau's all about. But you're probably thinking, Bricky, this doesn't sound that evil. This doesn't sound very grim, dark Warhammer.
I was thinking the same thing.
And you'd be right. The Tau Empire really don't have that much of a horrifying, grim, dark style like everybody else. They're much more younger, new age thing. In fact, they're probably a lot less evil and a lot even better than they are now back in the day, because they liked having like that good guy faction. But a lot of us who really like the dark, depressing style of Warhammer didn't really like it that much. So, see, the Tau get a lot of hate, and a lot of that hate isn't necessarily unjustified. It's mainly from a tabletop perspective, but as you can see from all the visuals I've shown you recently, they don't really fit in the 40k universe very well. They lack that super dark, dramatic, kind of high gothic level the Imperium has. They don't have the weird kind of like grungy stuff that Chaos or say the Orcs do. And the Necrons and the Eldar have their own specific style as well. The Tau really do look like something out of Gundam. And while that isn't necessarily a bad thing, it does definitely not fit too well. There's that. There's also the tabletop problem. In tabletop, Tau are horrible at melee combat, but exceptionally good at range combat. So they blast everyone from really, really far away, and they have a million rules to make it so that it's nearly impossible for you to get into melee combat. So it basically just forces you to bottleneck the game into one specific gameplay style, which is gun to gun. And if you're doing gun to gun, they're going to win every time, because they're the Tau, and the Tau are really damn good at shooting. So it's one of those things that make the Tau generally rather hated, and a lot of different reasons for that, both from style and such. But this is actually one of the things I wanted to end this video with, is that the Tau, while they have their issues, you should not be discouraged from playing them. I'll make plenty of Tau weeaboo jokes, of course I will, but it's all generally in good fun. Anyone who legitimately doesn't want you to play a faction is an idiot, and you shouldn't be giving them the time of day. You pick what you think is cool and what you like. In Warhammer, especially now, factions get better and they get worse. They grow and then they fall. You should only be playing what you think is cool. You like the look, you like the models. If you're talking tabletop, that is what you should be going for every time, is what you think is badass, because things change all the time. But the universe of Warhammer has so much going for it. Every faction has something interesting, every character has a story, and there's a million stories to be told. The universe is vast and exciting, and while it is dark, depressing, and horrible, that is the damn charm. And out of everything I've told you in these two videos, if anything you could take away is the reason why so many of us are so into this series and why we like it so much. Because with so much variety, such an expansive universe, and so much that can be done, you can find yourself having a pretty great time. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it has been informative to you. If you'd like to see more of me, Bricky, you have twitch.tv/Bricky for my streams. You have my merchandise site.
All right, folks, man. Fantastic. So, same thing with this last part, man. I don't have too many questions. I can still, same thing, like watch it. For some reason, this last half of it, the part 3 video I did, and then this part 4 one, it really just made me see how many other shows and movies and like jazz are like really inspired by Warhammer. But I don't have a ton of questions. One of the questions I was gonna ask was about like I always forget the tech people name. He actually mentioned in this video, but they're the ones who like released the Necrons. But that's the question I was gonna ask, like, since they're both like, are they like the biggest enemy to like the Necrons? Do they know how like their inner workings, or do they have like weapons to stop them or what have you? But he kind of answered a question because he said the Necrons kind of came out and seen like these primitive races, and they just want to kill them all. They want them off their lawn. So that question got answered. The Necrons actually sound pretty cool, man. Listen to their stuff. The Orcs, surprisingly, I didn't think I would be like a fan of the Orcs. The main part that makes them sound pretty cool to me is the fact that they can will stuff into existence. That's bananas. The Necrons have a really cool. Everybody has awesome lore, but I kind of like the Necron lore. It really reminds me of there's something cool about like Titans battling, and like how these ancients have like all this knowledge that they're not willing to share, so other people are willing to take it. And it kind of reminds me of the story, one of the storylines from like Stargate, when I haven't watched the episode in a long time, so I'm probably gonna butcher it. But one of the system lords wanted to learn about like immortality, and somehow he tricked his way into being with the what he called people who ascended, and he learned like their traits and stuff, and he came down and was between being ascended and actually being on, like, you know, in his own mortal form. And he was like somewhere in between. He was like this oddity, and he was essentially like using all the knowledge and stuff he learned from them to, you know, wreak havoc. And that's what it kind of like, just like these, you know, these titans hoarding their knowledge and then getting their knowledge essentially taken from them because they weren't willing to share. And usually it's a good reason why they weren't willing to show, because of how it can corrupt somebody who's not ready when it comes to like ascending to another level and stuff. So that reminded me of that, like that I forgot what season of Stargate it was. And yeah, there's just so much good stuff in this series, man. So much going on. And when he was talking about the old blue people, he's right. It just didn't sound like a match. It really sounded like something more like when he was describing them, like everybody under one banner, everybody like equal, fighting for the greater good. Sounded like Starfleet, and like the Star Trek is just so different from this because everything's so dark and everything, and like humans are in Star Trek, of course, are more like on a different level, and we're like all like want more races to come together. We don't want war, we want exploration, all that jazz, but we fight because we have to. That's what this kind of felt like, something from Star Trek. It didn't really fit the Warhammer universe to me. But yeah, man, I'm still not at a point where I know who I would like to play with. Like, there's so many different cool things. Like when it comes to like this evil portion, well, everybody's crazy and evil, so I don't want to say, but it wants to seem extra evil. Like the Necrons seem extra evil, so let's just say that. So they seem cool to play with. The sisters seem really cool to play with. Just about dropping churches and stuff, that shit just sounds so badass, man. Now the orcs, surprisingly, sound really cool to play with. There's just a lot of good characters, so I just don't know. And of course, like any Astartes, I don't know which faction I would say I like the most from the Astartes, but probably the Salamanders. I kind of like that they like kind of put human life above all. But I don't know. That actually sounds kind of campy too. You know what I mean? So I don't know, man. I'm enjoying this. I'm still absorbing everything. I don't have a lot of questions from this one. Like I said, he seemed to answer most of the questions. I really like the lore. The Necron lore is pretty cool. It just because it sounds and feels familiar. So most people kind of lean towards the familiar. And I guess I'm no exception to that. I think that's why I love Warhammer, like the whole Warhammer lore so far, is because everything feels familiar. And I know Warhammer did it first, so now I'm starting to realize that a lot of the sci-fi entities I love have been like inspired by Warhammer, which is pretty cool. I really don't have anything else, guys. I do have your other recommendations on the list, so continue to leave those below. That's super awesome of you. I know some people who are on the channel have subscribed because like I watch like Warcraft and stuff like that. I would definitely be watching more Warcraft, but right now I'm just with the time I do have, with the little time I do have, and like to spend on this channel, I kind of want to do what I enjoy, and I've really enjoyed the Warhammer the most, just to be honest with you. But like I said, I'm not neglecting the Warcraft people or the people who submitted like StarCraft videos. I'm gonna be checking those out. It's just I've just been really enjoying the Warhammer stuff. So, and of course, those are the requests that come in the most. So I also, not only am I biased because I've enjoyed the Warhammer stuff the most, also is what people are requesting the most as well. So, all right, guys, that is all for this one. Hopefully, you guys are happy, safe, and healthy, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.